Welcome back into the National Rundown, episode 5. And boy, are we happy to be back again this week with lots more to talk about. As always, these weeks are just heating up as we keep going. And Geono, there is so much to talk about this week. But first, let me check in with you. How was your week? Did you get up to anything crazy?
Well, I was just coming off of the Stingers game last night, and man, that was a heartbreaking loss for Edmonton. They dropped to 1-3, and we definitely have a lot of stuff to talk about with them. But man, lots of stuff now coming together. Obviously, we have the CBL, the CFL preseason now kind of fully underway with their first full week done and in the books. But man, there's so much stuff to talk about. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's just been a lot of watching basketball and football. But you know what? In my books, that is a great week.
Exactly. This is the best time of year. We're getting in full swing. CFL Week 1 is right around the corner, but more importantly, CBL, we have some interesting storylines that are just, blowing my mind because there's some teams that are skyrocketing, some that are tanking, and we're here to break it all down. So let's get right into it. The National Pulse, once again, we're going to put our finger right on that pulse and go coast to coast. So, Geono, out west, what do you got for me?
For sure. Well, first and foremost, obviously going into the CBL, we got the Winnipeg Sea Bears, who are still 3-1. We also have the Vancouver Bandits, who are 3-1, if I believe so, after their win over Calgary.
Yeah.
Man, things are just crowded as heck in the West. Like, you can't really predict what is going to happen right now. After Winnipeg and after Winnipeg and Vancouver, you got Edmonton, Calgary, and Saskatoon, all within one win of each other, which is really odd. I don't think many people had that coming out of the year.
Not at
but
all.
man, it is absolutely flying by the season. Where we're already 4 games through for most teams. I believe we're having some teams go for Game 5 tonight. So definitely a lot of stuff as we rapidly approach the 25% of the way through the season. And obviously, it's now not so early as it was probably last week. And teams start to look, and be like, hey, what do we got going on here? So this is really where, the pack starts to separate and you start to see where different teams are at. For the CBL, it's pretty tight out here in the West, especially when you go through 3 through 5. Obviously, the CFL, the Riders finished up their preseason a little bit, and I know we'll get into some of that stuff. But man, the CFL season, obviously it's so quick. It's coming right around the corner, and I know that a lot of people are definitely chomping at the bit to get to that because, like you said, it's the best time of the year when there's CBL and CFL football on all the time. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, man, like the Canadian talent, like it's really proving itself. And this is, if you're really interested in Canadian sports, this is the best time of year. So I'm going to check out on this Central Canada now. I mean, we're looking again at those Brampton Honey Badgers, sitting atop the East. But, they have a very interesting matchup coming today where they're going to face off against the Winnipeg Sea Bears, who are the top in the West. So that'll be a very interesting clash. But all of the teams really, I think they all recorded a win this week. So we have Ottawa, who is now 2-3. I want to talk about them a little later. I think there's some questions to be raised, but then Scarborough 3-0, a very surprising start for them. We probably did not see that coming whatsoever, but it's super exciting. Niagara finally on the board last night in Edmonton in a very, very close game, but again, they don't have Khalil Ahmad, so we're still kind of curious on what's going to happen there. But then to update you on the CFL preseason, Hamilton, Toronto played this weekend where Toronto did get the best of Hamilton and also had Montreal and Ottawa, where Ottawa did get the best of Montreal. But there's really nothing much to say there. It's preseason. We're still playing those depth guys, seeing what we got. So it's just exciting that there's football, but there's going to be a lot more interesting stuff as we go down the pipeline in the CFL.
I
But
agree.
other than that, I think we're pretty well covered on the East, but I'm very excited to break down all of this.
No, 100%. Well, especially with the CFL, like out west, we had obviously Edmonton kind of came out with a shocker, 34-16 over the Lions. I don't think many people, probably had Edmonton beating the Lions, even if it was just preseason.
Oh yeah.
They definitely played a lot more, I feel like, of their starters than you probably would have thought, especially early in the game. I had some CBL games to watch that night, so I couldn't exactly tune in all the time. But I was like, I was keeping tabs on it, and obviously through 34-16, like if you're the Elks, like you're good, but it's like you don't get too optimistic. But I think they looked good. Like they looked good enough that this is probably what they wanted. They probably feel like this is a better way to start the season rather than starting with a 34-16 loss. So for them, I feel like that's nothing but great for them. And then obviously the Riders and Bombers had a great one too. It was 31-27 for Saskatchewan. Kind of like that Banjo Bowl rivalry. It's always nice, but obviously I feel like Saskatchewan feels like they're probably in a good position with their depth, and I think that was the number one thing for them to kind of look out for. And then I don't believe there's anything else in the West for us out here because obviously Calgary was on their bye week. They played on week 1 against Saskatchewan, so there's lots of stuff to look forward to for preseason week 3.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And later in the episode, stay tuned because we're going to be debating Davis Alexander, a very interesting topic. I'm super excited for that. But before we get into that, we're going to cover some CBL and something that's pretty fresh on your mind, Giano. I'm going to get you to talk about what you saw last night in Edmonton and what their team is really doing. And, you also got to look at Niagara, which is interesting.
Yeah, 100%. It was first and foremost like Edmonton is in a really weird spot right now. They fall to 1-3 after the loss last night. We were recording this the day after that. So obviously, things are very fresh in my mind. A lot of what I feel like they did very well is they battled back. The first quarter was not very good for Edmonton. I believe they were allowing like 70% shooting from the field from Niagara. You're not going to win basketball games doing that. So for them, that was really out of character. They started to get better as the game went on. And I think that was something I was watching. I liked Samaj Teal. I asked Jordan Baker about that post game. I watched him really run the offense. He was the guy that would bring the ball up from the baseline to half court and start facilitating guys to be like, hey, you need to be here, you need to be here. I didn't expect him to be like the kind of starting point guard, but I asked Jordan Baker about that post game, and he said that's what they brought him in for. I'm not quoting him word for word here, but he said something about like, this is what they brought him in for, to be the starting point guard of the Edmonton Stingers. So when you think about that, I'm like, okay, you start to figure out where this lineup is kind of going to be. I think Teal was really, really special for them last night. He dropped 17 in Vancouver on the Friday. So there's a lot to like about his game and how he's fitting into Edmonton. Dane Danger continues to be really amazing for the team. Obviously, the free throw shooting may not have been the best, but at the end of the day, basketball is a team sport. You can't really pin it on one guy, obviously, when there's also, some acclimation process and time to get there. The biggest thing for me is he continues to dominate everywhere he goes on the paint. Like every time he gets into the post, like he's a threat. And for Edmonton, I think that's something to work on, right? And that's something you can kind of build off of. So for me, that was the biggest takeaway. They've continued to really fall late in games, going into the fourth quarter, obviously against Winnipeg and then now against Niagara. Definitely not the stuff they want to be at, losing games on really within 2 points,
Yeah.
both nice. So definitely not where you want to be at, but a lot of what I figured was probably the bigger storyline was Jordan Baker dropping some hints post-game about new faces coming to the lineup. Now, I asked him if there was somebody he could comment on as to who that was. He declined, but the big thing here is that means there could be some new faces to the Edmonton Stinger lineup. Obviously, coming from the word of the head coach, probably means it's going to happen. Obviously, like I said, things can happen, things can change, but definitely sounds like it's pretty official. So that's an interesting tidbit. For me, I don't believe that would be Nick Hornsby because he is signed under contract already. I'm not totally familiar with FIBA rules because they're complicated. To me, that does not single Nick Hornsby. Although I remember from the Vancouver game on May 16th, he said that Nick Hornsby should be back with the team by the end of the month. They were hopeful for that. It is May 25th when we're recording this, so
Yeah.
we will see over the next week if that is true, and if he's there for the team in with Red Deer in the Red Deer game. Obviously, we will see if that happens, but for me, I'm really interested to see about who that is. I don't know exactly who that might be. I have an inclination that it might be a big, because I feel like they're the weakest there. The guard position is really swamped. Like you think about Samaj Steele, Mike Nuga, you think about Tay Donald, right? And I know Mason Bouchier is there too. Like you look there, I'm like, is there much more room for a guard? I don't really think so. So when you think about that, you think about, how Nick Hornsby's probably coming back and he likes to play that kind of wing power forward spot. I start to look at it to be like, okay, that's probably Nick's spot. And there's not too many other spots. So for me, I lean probably like a power forward, maybe a center. But to be honest with you, it really feels like it's wide open in the air. But an interesting tidbit from Edmonton going on to a long 3-game road trip. And to wrap my point up here, they talked about the importance of, not having this thing kind of tumble on top of them and having too big of a hole to kind of dig out of. Everybody kind of felt like this was an important road trip coming up. So for Edmonton, it's an early season gut check, and I think that's the interesting part out west is they're probably a team to keep an eye on because this could really, define their season over the next 3 games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with everything you said there's a lot to unpack. But you're absolutely right, and you're hitting on all the points. I think to what you just said, it's really early. It's looking like it's Vancouver, Winnipeg up top, and now with Calgary being, dropping, there's going to be some holes there, and there's going to be a spot for Edmonton to, consider making a run. But I think they absolutely need to, add a big, and I think they need to figure out. I know I said this. I think I said this last week. They need to figure out who is that guy in the clutch that can, get them over that hump. And right now, it feels like it's by committee. Like you got to see who's on the given night, who's hot, and whatnot. But they need a guy, and hopefully, maybe one of these new faces we're gonna see is a guy that can bring some clutch play. But we'll have to see. I think you hit on a lot of the points there, though. But what did you think of Niagara? Did you see anything particular there?
Yeah, I think that they made some real progress. One of the things I think everybody's kind of talking about, and we'll be getting to Niagara right here, right? Talking about just thinking about, them without Khalil Ahmad is a different, structure, right? Like that's kind of the big stuff when you're thinking about Niagara. It is Khalil Ahmad. He's a big reason why they won 2 championships. So for them to kind of play without him is a little bit of to me, it's something to watch because it's like, okay, how does this team react to not having, their engine on the court at all times, right? Like he's not in the rotation. He's not with the team. For me, that gets the opportunity to really examine, okay, what is the team he's going to be stepping into really about, right? Are they competitive? Can they be competitive without him, right? So you can see when they get Khalil Ahmad back, is it exactly something that he can be, elevate the team to, a contender in the East? That remains to be seen. But what I really liked is that this team, like I said, they shot 70% from the field in the first quarter. To me, I'm like, obviously that's not sustainable for the whole game, but there is something to be said about that, to starting hot without your number 1 superstar. So for me, I liked that. I think that they made some good waves. They probably needed this win more than Edmonton did. So obviously, if you're Niagara, you probably take that as, they probably had a little bit more motivation to probably come out and win, get their first win of the season. In terms of that, I feel like they did really well to they kind of quelled that concern about, is Niagara going to be okay without Khalil Ahmad? I still think there is some concern there. Where do they kind of fit in? How much longer can they survive? But what do you think? Like, do you think that how much longer do you think they can go without Khalil Ahmad before you start to be like, okay, they're going to start losing, they're going to start losing ground? Because obviously playoffs are 1 through 4 seeds. So obviously the 5th seed is like that's the bottom and only one team's not going to make it. But you don't want to go up against the 1 seed, right? Like that. I feel like everybody does not want to be that 4 seed.
That top 3.
So how much longer do you think Niagara can run without Khalil Ahmad? Because I don't think that they have much more time. I think if they lose time, like they're gonna be in that 3rd or 4th seed almost guaranteed at this point.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing with Niagara. Like, here's the thing with any team, really. But for Niagara, this is a positive. you know your team identity, right? You know your team identity is Khalil Ahmad, and you have to play through that. You know he is your guy. You build around that. You play around that. But right
Yeah.
now, you don't have an identity without him. You have no really sense of direction. It feels so when you're playing without your identity, you have to. You're really grinding for these games. You're really trying to figure out somehow how do you scrape out a win. And right now, they were able to do that last night. So good on them. Good on them. They got a win under the belt. They really needed it, like you said. But I think until they get him back, they're not going to be able to win games like that. I will
Yeah.
say, put it like it was a respective offensive effort without him, but
Yeah.
they don't have much longer to answer your question. So
Yeah.
I think if they can somehow stay within, 2, 3, 4 games back of, a nice third or second or third spot, I think they're in a good position.
Yeah.
But to see it right now, I think until they get him back, they will stay at the bottom of that East and probably in that fifth spot for the time being.
I agree with that. I think that the big thing in the East right now is that there really hasn't been that shuffling of the order like we've seen in the West.
It feels
It's
so tight.
yeah, like it's starting to appear. Like obviously Scarborough, off the top of my mind, I believe is 3-2. I could be wrong on that.
3-0.
Again, I watched 3-0. Okay, again,
Yeah.
I must be thinking of somebody else. Either way, big picture here. Like they feel really good, but at the same time, I'm like, is it bad that I feel a little bit more confident in Brampton than I do in Scarborough? I know this is a little bit of like a
No,
sidetrack,
you're
but
definitely
but,
right on
but
that.
am I on something there? Like, do you kind of feel that same way?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, well, it's because of the expectations that we originally have. Like we know that Brampton is going to be a good team, and we didn't expect Scarborough. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely going to be touching on this later. But I think Scarborough has the pieces to be compete with Brampton for sure.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I mean, they already had a win against Winnipeg that proves that they're competing with the top level. I know they beat the Mamba. I forget who their first win was against, but
I think it was Montreal.
yeah, probably, yeah,
Yeah.
Montreal. So it's like,
Yeah.
you have a proven win, so it's not like you can
Yeah.
be like, okay, schedule whatnot. But
Yeah.
there's plenty of points that I have on Scarborough I'm going to touch later on, but I think you're definitely onto something there, and I think it almost feels the same with even. I was gonna say the same with Winnipeg and Vancouver, but
Yeah.
I think that could be a little different though.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. Like I feel like Winnipeg is like exceeding expectations.
Yeah.
Vancouver is meeting expectations.
Yeah.
I feel like that Calgary game was really a defining moment, to be like, okay, are you going to be, because 3-1 looks so much better than 2-2. I feel like, again, it is one win at the end of the day, but 3-1 looks so much better than 2-2. And I mean, ask the Edmonton Singers. I'm not throwing shade, but I mean, 1-3, you do not feel great about yourselves compared to
No.
the fact that you could be 3-1.
Yeah.
If you scored like 4 more baskets, you could be 3-1. And
Yeah.
I think that's the crazy part of the CBL, right? The margin of error is so small. Especially early on, right? Like these games count, and they're going to affect you down the road when you're looking for playoff seeding. So for me, I'm like, you talk about, Vancouver, Winnipeg. Winnipeg really feels like they're exceeding expectations, and they don't even have Xavier Moon, which is crazy. You think about, where Vancouver's at. They had a lot of pieces, kind of trickle in a little bit late, so they kind of feel like they've been building and building and building. For me, I'm really excited about them. The more that they play, for them to be 3-1 is really great. I think going back out east, like you said, Scarborough we didn't have the same expectations because they added so many players so late that it was so hard to predict. Brampton has been building this since like February, March.
Yeah, exactly.
So we kind of knew what we were getting when we were building up to the season. But I think you make a lot of great points about that. Yeah.
And I think it could be like a lot of it, like you just said there. It is the the 1-win difference. Like if Scarborough even doesn't win that, it was a 2-point win over Winnipeg. If they don't win that game, they're 2-1, and their wins are against Montreal and the Mambo, and we're talking about them.
It's a different conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's really, and even with the Blackjacks, like they've had so many close games, but they're 2-3, where it's like if they were like 4-1, I would be so much different on them. So it's so close right now that we got to keep in mind that these teams might not have exactly the record. It's such a
Yeah.
small sample size still that it's like the
Yeah.
record doesn't really maybe show how they've been playing for better or for worse. So
I agree. I agree.
yeah, but on to that. Let's keep going with Ottawa here because
Yeah.
they're 2-3 now. They've played 5 games, which is they've had a lot so far. So it's a bit bigger sample size for me to kind of build on. But I think as high as I am on them, I'm not loving what I've seen the past few games. I think
Yeah.
they're in a 2-game losing streak. It would be now. So
I think so. Yeah.
it's not great, but I think this team still might be a piece away. Not saying that it's a player they need to add, but it's
Yeah.
maybe something that they need to adjust. Somebody maybe needing to step up. But I would definitely say on a personal level, I'm getting lower on Ottawa, but I still feel like Ottawa is a higher tier East team. I'm curious, what do you think of Ottawa?
Yeah, it's been a little bit interesting. Obviously, I watch Ottawa a little bit more than other teams because I write on them.
Yeah.
For me, like I wrote a piece a few days ago about how they kind of proved that they belonged in the East. When I looked at their play against Brampton. Now I made it very clear that like Jameer Nelson Jr. is not in the lineup. And I think if you're Brampton, that makes you even scarier to think that, you're probably DPOY is not in the lineup. For me, that's pretty crazy. So, when you look at how Ottawa played against them, I think they pushed them. I think they could have won. They were within that like margin of error where, things go your way, you can probably do things a little bit better. And I felt confident about that after, whether they were 2-2. I didn't feel like, okay, it's time to throw in the towel. Where I was a little bit concerned was to their loss against Montreal. I think we both were a little bit unsure of Montreal at the beginning of the season, and I think rightfully so. I still call them top heavy. I want to see that depth kind of consistently prove it week after week. We will see that if that actually pans out. But for me, the thing that concerned me with Ottawa in that game was I believe they shot 8% from 3. And I'm like, you cannot shoot that and like consistently expect to win basketball games. Now, again, they call it a 3-point percentage like an average, right? So you're going to hit below that and above that most nights, right? You're rarely going to hit like the absolute like average. But to hit 8%, and they shot a decent amount of threes. Like, I think they were in the high 20s. I do not have that off the top of my head, but like I don't have that in front of me. It's all off the top of my head, but I think they shot like high 20s. And when I think about that, I'm like, okay, that is not good math. Like, I think it's special to note, like, okay, you did make it close against Montreal and you shot that bad from the 3. But at the same time, like, you think about where this team could be, again, if things just, you don't shoot yourself in the foot. So for me, I'm like, okay, that is concerning. Are you concerned with their, like, 3-point shooting? Because that was what concerned me the most out of that Montreal game.
Like, I know they can score, right? But it's going to be they need those role players, especially those 3-point guys, to step up, and that's going to be key. And right now they're not, obviously. But it's just so hard for me to navigate where this team is, and because I'm looking at it like this, Montreal goes and beats Ottawa, right?
Yeah.
Montreal to me is still not there because watching them against
agree.
they barely scraped by against the Mamba, to be honest, in that game.
Yeah.
Like that. The Mamba is honestly a good scale to see of where your team is at.
That is a very good point. They are kind of like the baseline.
A lot, then it's like, what are you doing, really?
Yeah.
So it's so like I'm definitely not high on Montreal yet. So Montreal beating Ottawa to me is not a good look on them either. So that's why I'm lower on Ottawa, but I know like they almost beat Brampton, so it's like it's so hard. Like, what is going on? Like, really, it's any given night, but trying to navigate where these teams are at, it just feels so difficult right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know what the East is doing. Like, what is happening in the East, man? Like, I don't get that. Like, and I was just scrolling through the recent scores. I realized that the Shooting Stars beat the Mamba by 4 points. I'm like, 4 points. I'm like, you, and we think of you as the second best team in the East right now. I'm like, what is going on in the East, man? I don't know. I think that there's a lot of stuff to figure out. Again, when we hit that 25% in the season, I know it's only 2 more games for a lot of teams, and you hit 6 games, but 6 games, you start to feel like, okay, again, that's 25% of the season. You start to get a little bit of that better. Okay, who are you start to separate yourselves? You should at least. Like, we could very well be in the same position next week. I hope not for our sanity, so we kind of get a little bit of a better picture. But for me, I'm like, it's so tight right now. Like, I don't think you can confidently get a grip
No.
on,
And it
who's
feels like
gonna be where.
these teams, like they're playing to their opponent no matter what it is. Like
Yeah,
Scarborough, I mean Scarborough especially, like beating Mamba by 2 points, but then beating Winnipeg by 2 points. It's like, well, you got to figure out.
how does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like what are you just trying to have close game? I don't know, man. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting, and hopefully maybe this week gives us more clarity. But
Yeah,
yeah,
100%. It'll be interesting. I'll be
a good
watching
watch
that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. To move on, let's talk about Vancouver. What is their identity?
Yeah.
Because for me, I'll start with this.
Yeah.
For me, they have a lot of good pieces, and especially
Yeah.
Jalen House averaging 30 and 10. I know he averages 5 turnovers as well, but 30 and 10 is beautiful. Like that's a guy
Very.
who just signed up right at the start of the season. Like tremendous signing. But for Vancouver, I'm liking what they have, and I think they're
Yeah.
still, like you said, they're meeting expectations, but I feel like they're on the cusp of breaking through that, and I think it was because at the start maybe we were a little like, hey, okay, maybe they're a little below. Now they're
Yeah.
meeting. I think they're just gonna get better from this point on.
Yeah.
So they back-to-back games, I think it was with 111 points. Like their offense I feel is there, and I think it's just going to be about, cleaning up maybe the turnovers, the defensive side, and I think this team has a lot of pieces. But
I agree with that. Yeah. Like, I feel like Tyrese Samuel was really going to be the guy this year.
yeah.
I feel like that's kind of in question now. I feel like, it could be
Well, yeah.
Jalen House's team. I don't
And it
think
might be
Mitch
better
Creek
that
is
way
ever
for
coming
him
back.
not to be, the guy. It might be better for him to
Yeah.
play as a 1A 1B. I think oftentimes with teams we're seeing that it's going to be a much better option for you.
I agree. Like I don't think Mitch Creek is coming back. I think that's been made very, very clear. I think that they had to kind of find that next guy, right? And I think Tyrese Samuel is doing a great job of that. I don't think that Vancouver doesn't believe in him. I just think when you have the opportunity to add a lot of talent, you take it, right? In the CBL, like, guys can leave early, guys can go cold, and then you may have to release them. Things can happen. It's not like the NBA where you're locked into guys for 4 years. Like, everybody's here on a 1-year contract, right? And a 1-year contract, like, it's really a prove it year. Sometimes you might just have a bad year and things can turn, right? So for me, I'm like, there's a lot of stuff to be excited about, when you're Vancouver and you're thinking about, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, they are on the cusp. I feel like, coming into the year because of what they had played with last year, I think you were right. Like, we had that expectation of being a contender. They've been adding pieces though, which is that's the important piece here. Is that it felt like they, maybe were not the best in the first 2 games, right? They're trying to figure it out. Now you get to the point of, you're 3-1, and like I said, 3-1 feels a heck of a lot better than 2-2. So when you think about that, like I think that you're right. They're starting to add more pieces, and that's what makes me feel like you're right. They're getting to that next level. It's going to be interesting if Vancouver and Winnipeg are the top 2 teams, exactly how those 2 teams match up against each other. Because to be honest with you, I don't know how that one's going to go. Like, Xavier Moon and Teddy Allen, if it's full strength, I don't know who I would pick there. Like, who would you pick in that situation? Would you go with Vancouver, or are you going with Winnipeg?
No, I think right now, looking at that, like putting it that way, like you said, looking at it, I lean Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I think they have too much. Like, I just don't know how Vancouver positionally can contain the 2 of them.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
But it'd be very interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't think they haven't played yet this season.
I don't think they have. I know the schedule pretty well. I don't know when they do. It's just something that came to my mind. I'm like, what do we think about that? Like, that would be probably tight. I think, for me, I would probably say that it would be Winnipeg. I would give the edge to Winnipeg just because I don't think we've ever seen a Teddy Allen, Xavier Moon duo. Like, both of these guys could probably win MVP, right? And we talked about that last week, but just the more I think about it, I'm like, I think Vancouver would have to be, they would be the underdog in that situation. I don't think they can't do it. It's just more if I had to choose somebody who I'd pick as the favorite, I would pick Winnipeg. And I think we're both agree with that.
I think the biggest X factor in that entire thing would be Tyrese Samuel. If he could play to the best of his abilities, I think that would, probably make that really close and almost limit maybe, it would make everybody more comfortable on Vancouver. I'll say that. But I do want to say one thing about Tyrese Samuel. I feel like he is the type of player that you need to have guys around him that play well. And I think he needs to see people that make him feel comfortable around him to play at his best. I don't know if he's that guy where it's like, he's going to be the one to take control, to lead the team, to all this. But I think he's such a powerful piece that if you put a guy like Jalen, that's why I think Jalen House is so good for him, that it's like it almost calms him down and it can like make him the best version of himself. But
100%.
That's my take.